Welcome to African Tales and Hearts, where stories of love, family, and destiny come alive. The annual Ofori-Atta Gala was in full swing, a dazzling spectacle of wealth and power. Upstairs, in the quiet of the family wing, Amara walked with a soft smile on her face. Her fiancé, Richard, had excused himself from the party, complaining of a headache, and she was going to check on him. Her concern was that of a woman deeply in love, anticipating a life of partnership and happiness. She walked towards the guest suite but stopped when she noticed a soft light coming from under the door of her stepsister Zola's room. She heard voices from within, low and relaxed. It was Richard's voice, mixed with Zola's soft laughter. Amara smiled again, relieved. He must have gone to his in-law-to-be for an aspirin. She approached the door, her hand raised to knock, when the words she heard made her hand freeze in midair. Richard's voice was low, intimate, and laced with a lover's satisfaction. He said, "Your mother was right. With my family's political connections and your father's empire, we're unstoppable." Zola laughed, a sound that was both smug and seductive. She replied, "Patience, my love. Once we are married, Amara will be nothing but a memory. A placeholder. You are with the real prize now." Amara stood motionless, the world tilting on its axis. There were the voices of lovers, casually and confidently planning a future that was built upon the ashes of her own. From the sounds they made, she knew what they were doing. Her heart did not just break. It was obliterated. She backed away from the door, one silent step at a time, her hand pressed against her mouth to stifle a sob. The grand, opulent hallway suddenly felt like a tomb. Downstairs, the cheerful music of the party drifted up, a sickening soundtrack to her private apocalypse. She walked back to her own suite and locked the door. The heavy diamond necklace her stepmother had forced her to wear felt like a slave's collar. She tore it off, letting the cold stones clatter onto the marble floor. Her gaze fell upon a simple, unadorned sunstone necklace lying on her vanity. It had been her mother's. She picked it up. The stone was smooth and warm against her cold skin. It was the only piece of truth left in the room. In that moment, a new, cold clarity washed over her. She would not cry. She would not scream. She would disappear. For the next hour, she moved with a quiet, desperate purpose. From a hidden safe, she took a thick stack of cash. Into a worn leather duffel bag, she packed simple trousers, practical blouses, and sturdy shoes. She took no jewelry except for the sunstone. She left her phone on the bed, a digital leash she was determined to sever. Slipping out a side entrance used by the catering staff, Amara was swallowed by the warm Accra night. She eventually found herself at a bus station, a chaotic whirlwind of noise and humanity. She bought a ticket for the first bus leaving the city, its destination unimportant. All that mattered was that it was going away. As the bus rumbled through the dark countryside, Amara clutched the sunstone necklace, the warmth a small comfort against the chill of her new reality. The betrayal hadn't happened in a vacuum. It was the final, brutal act in a long play of cruelty orchestrated by her stepmother, Vera. She remembered the night before the gala, sitting at her vanity, holding this very necklace. Vera had entered without knocking, her eyes landing on the simple stone with disdain. "Are you really wearing that?" she had asked, her voice smooth and condescending. "It looks like something you'd buy at a market stall." When Amara explained it was her mother's, Vera had simply replaced it with the cold, heavy diamonds, saying, "This family's future is built on diamonds, not pebbles." And Zola, her stepsister, had played her part perfectly. At the gala, she had accidentally spilled red wine down the front of Amara's gown, a violent splash of crimson. As she dabbed at it with fake concern, she leaned in and whispered, "Now you look as dirty on the outside as you are on the inside." Amara now saw it all with horrifying clarity. It had never been about simple jealousy. It had been a coordinated campaign to isolate her, undermine her, and ultimately, to replace her. The betrayal she had overheard was not the beginning. It was the end. And now, on a bus to nowhere, a new beginning was about to be forced upon her. The journey was a blur of darkness and flickering lights. Amara huddled by the window, the sunstone clutched in her hand, her mind a numb void. After days of aimless travel, moving from one dusty town to the next, she found herself back in Accra. She was drawn by a magnetic pull to a different part of the city, the vibrant, beating heart of it all, Makola Market. The sheer, overwhelming force of life there was a shock to her system. The air was thick with the scent of spices, smoked fish, and ripe mangoes. The sound was a symphony of haggling voices, rhythmic chopping, and the distant beat of a high-life tune from a tinny radio. This was a world that operated on its own terms, a world of grit, hustle, and raw, unfiltered life. It was here, she decided, that she could truly disappear. She found a small, single room for rent above a tailor's shop. The room was tiny, but the window overlooked the colorful chaos of the market, and Amara found she preferred it to the silent, manicured lawns of her old home. Her first challenge was survival. Her emergency fund was bleeding away on rent and food. Remembering her childhood jewelry-making classes, she bought some basic supplies. Her first stall was little more than a blanket on the ground with a few clumsy bracelets laid out. Customers walked by without a second glance. After 3 days of selling nothing, a shadow fell over her blanket. She looked up to see a formidable woman with a radiant smile and eyes that missed nothing. The woman's arms were laden with colorful wax print fabrics. "Yai, small sister," the woman's voice boomed, full of laughter. "Are you trying to sell these things, or are you just showing them to the sun?" "The sun does not have any money." Amara, startled, could only stammer, I am trying to sell them." "Ha! With that little mouse voice? The goats in the alley make more noise." "My name is Rose." "What is yours?" "Amara," she replied softly. "Amara," Rose repeated, testing the name. "Well, Amara, you cannot sell anything if you look like you are about to attend your own funeral. Smile. Let the people see your beautiful teeth. It is free." This was Amara's introduction to Auntie Rose. Rose took Amara under her wing, treating her with a mix of tough love and fierce affection. A few days later, seeing Amara nibbling on a small piece of bread for lunch, Rose marched over with a steaming container. "Jollof," she announced, placing it in Amara's hands. "My daughter made too much. If you do not eat it, I will be forced to, and I am trying to maintain my girlish figure." She patted her ample, comfortable stomach and winked. As Amara ate the best jollof rice she had ever tasted, Rose sat with her. "So, little sister, you have the look of a girl who is running from something. Here in Makola, we do not ask questions. But we also do not like secrets that bring trouble." "I won't bring any trouble," Amara promised, her voice earnest. "Good," Rose replied. "Because trouble in the market is like oil on a white shirt. It spreads, and it never truly washes out." Auntie Rose became Amara's protector and mentor. Her first lesson was about the hidden dangers. She gestured subtly with her chin towards a man collecting money from a nearby stall. "You see that man?" Rose said, her voice low. "He is market security. He is also a thief. He will tell you he needs payment to protect your stall. He is protecting it from himself. Pay him a little, but not too much. Make him think you have nothing worth stealing." Rose taught her which suppliers mixed cheap plastic beads with their glass ones, and how to tell the difference by the sound they made. One afternoon, a smooth-talking man lingered at Amara's stall, making her uncomfortable. Before Amara had to deal with him, Auntie Rose appeared as if from nowhere, chasing him off with a sharp tongue and a well-aimed threat about his wife. "That one," Rose said to Amara afterward, "his connections are a one-way street to misery. He preys on new girls. If you see him again, you scream my name." Amara's gratitude was immense. She was learning that her new home had its own predators, just as insidious as the one she had left behind. With Rose's protection, Amara began to thrive. She started a side hustle watching the vendors' children in the afternoons. Drawing on years of tutoring her younger step-siblings, she would read them stories and teach them their letters. This earned her a steady income and the goodwill of the other women. Her jewelry improved dramatically. Her background in high fashion gave her a unique eye. She didn't just string beads, she created collections, matching her designs to the colors in Auntie Rose's new fabrics. The other women in the market started to notice, becoming her walking advertisements. Her fluency in French and English also found a new purpose. She became the unofficial translator for the market, helping vendors negotiate with tourists. She never asked for money, but she was repaid in other ways: a discount on fruit, a prime piece of fish, and most importantly, respect. One morning, Auntie Rose was in a heated argument with a supplier over an inferior batch of fabric. The man was shouting, trying to intimidate her. Amara walked over calmly. She looked at the invoice and then at the fabric. She spoke, her voice clear and firm. The consignment agreement specifies grade A wax print. This is grade B, at best. That constitutes a breach of contract. According to commercial law, my aunt is entitled to refuse the shipment. The man was stunned into silence by her precise, legalistic language. Auntie Rose, beaming with pride, won the argument. Amara was no longer an outsider, she was a vital part of the market's complex ecosystem. It was in this new life that Amara truly met Kofi. She had seen him before, a quiet man who ran a nearby stall filled with beautifully carved wooden stools and sculptures. He rarely spoke, his focus always on the piece of wood in his hands. But he was often watching. He saw the confident young woman who could laugh at Auntie Rose's loud jokes, who could patiently teach a child to read, and who could expertly handle a difficult customer, all in the space of an hour. His first real interaction with her was during a sudden afternoon downpour. The canvas covering her stall ripped, and a torrent of water threatened to ruin her entire stock. As she struggled, a pair of strong hands reached up to help her. "Here," Kofi's calm voice said. "You need to angle it, so the water runs off." Together, they wrestled the tarp into place. Soaked but grateful, she thanked him. He simply smiled, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. A few days later, he approached her stall holding up a piece of what he was carving. "I cannot get this curve right. My hands are too clumsy today." Amara looked at it, then at her own beadwork. "Sometimes," she said, "you have to let the material tell you what it wants to be. You are fighting it. Try following the grain, instead of forcing it." Kofi looked at her, then back at the wood, a look of revelation on his face. "You have an artist's soul," he said, his voice full of genuine admiration. "No," she replied, a small, confident smile playing on her lips. "I have a trader's spirit. Auntie Rose is teaching me." Their friendship began with these small moments. But it deepened one sweltering afternoon when business was slow. Amara sat behind her stall, sketching in a small, worn notebook. It was a private world of intricate designs, a holdover from her past life that she kept hidden. Kofi approached quietly, holding out a freshly cut pineapple. "Auntie Rose says you look too serious. She sent this to sweeten your mood." Amara quickly closed the sketchbook, but not before Kofi caught a glimpse of a complex, architectural design. "What was that?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. "Nothing," she said, her expression guarded. "Just ideas." "Let me see," he insisted gently. "Please." Hesitantly, she opened the book. Kofi's eyes widened. The pages were filled with stunning, sophisticated drawings that looked less like market jewelry and more like wearable art. One design was based on the geometric patterns of Kent cloth, another mimicked the soaring arches of a cathedral. He tapped a drawing of a particularly complex necklace. "To get this kind of stability in the real world," he said, almost to himself, "you'd need to use a cantilevered buttress, especially if it were made of metal." It was a highly technical architectural term. Amara looked at him, surprised. He laughed it off. "Oh, just something I read in a book once. I like buildings." He turned his attention back to the drawings. "Amara," he said, his voice now full of awe, "this is genius. You are a true designer." His recognition of her hidden talent, his understanding of her vision, was a powerful affirmation. He saw the part of her she thought she had to keep secret. A violent rainstorm, one of the first of the season, swept through Accra, turning the market into a chaotic mess. A powerful gust of wind ripped Kofi's canvas tarp, sending his smaller, more delicate wooden carvings crashing to the ground. Amara, securing her own stall, saw his distress and ran to help. Together, soaked to the bone, they gathered the scattered pieces. One carving, a beautiful sculpture of a Sankofa bird, had its wing broken. Kofi stared at it, his face a mask of despair. "It's ruined," he said, his voice hollow. "This was for a client. My father." He stopped himself, catching the slip. "Your father?" Amara asked gently, as they took shelter under the awning of Auntie Rosa's closed stall. Kofi hesitated, then decided on a half-truth. "He's a foreman. On a construction site," he lied. "He thinks I'm wasting my education. He always says, 'Why carve wood when you can build with concrete?' He doesn't understand." Amara listened, her expression full of empathy. "It's hard when your parents have a blueprint for your life, isn't it?" she said, her voice soft. "They see you as a future asset, not a person. They don't realize that sometimes the strongest structures are the ones you have to design yourself." Her use of corporate and architectural language, blueprint, asset, structures, was unusual for a market seller, but it perfectly captured her understanding of his struggle. He felt a powerful connection to this woman who, despite her different life, seemed to understand his own cage perfectly. She picked up the broken Sankofa bird. "It's not ruined," she said. "It's just changed. A wing is broken, but the story is still there. Maybe the story is about being broken and learning to fly differently." He looked at her, his heart stirred by her wisdom and her kindness. In that moment, under the drumming rain, the shared secret of running from a life that was not their own formed an unspoken, unbreakable bond between them. The rainy season gave way to a period of bright, clear days. The market buzzed with renewed energy, and so did the connection between Amara and Kofi. Their friendship had become the steady rhythm of their lives, a comforting and essential beat. They were the first to greet each other in the morning and the last to say goodbye in the evening. Auntie Rose watched their slow-burning courtship with a knowing, amused smile. "You too," she said to Amara one afternoon, while pretending to inspect a new batch of beads. "You circle each other like two shy birds. Just build a nest already." Amara felt a warmth spread through her chest at the thought. The idea of a future with Kofi, once a distant, impossible dream, now felt closer and more real than anything she had ever known. A few days later, as the market was winding down, Kofi approached her stall. He seemed more hesitant than usual, a rare sign of nervousness in the usually self-assured man. He held out 2 tickets. "There is a high-life concert at the National Theater on Saturday," he said, his eyes fixed on her face, searching for her reaction. "A tribute to the old masters. Iti Mensa, the Ramblers. I was wondering if you would like to go with me." It was more than just an invitation. It was a step out of the world of the market and into the city, together. It was a step into a new chapter. Amara's heart leaped. She gave him a radiant smile, the brightest he had ever seen. "I would love that, Kofi," she said. "I would love that very much." The night of the concert arrived. Amara wore a beautiful dress Auntie Rose had insisted on giving her, made from a vibrant wax print fabric that shimmered under the lights. She adorned it with a delicate silver necklace of her own design. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman she was proud of, a woman who was strong, happy, and standing on her own 2 feet. Kofi was waiting for her at the entrance to the theater. He had traded his work clothes for a sharp, well-fitting shirt. He looked handsome, and the way he looked at her, with open admiration and affection, made her feel truly beautiful. The theater was not a place of quiet reverence, it was alive. The band was on fire, the horns blazing and the guitars weaving intricate, joyful melodies. The lead singer's voice soared, engaging the crowd in a powerful call and response that vibrated through the entire hall. This was not music for sitting still. The aisles were filled with people dancing, their shoulders, hips, and feet moving in perfect sync with the infectious rhythm. Amara, who had only ever known the stiff, choreographed dances of her father's galas, watched with a shy longing. Kofi saw the look in her eyes. He leaned over, his voice warm over the music. There are no rules here, he shouted happily. Just let the music move you. He took her hand and led her into the swirling energy of the aisle. He didn't try to teach her, he just started dancing, his own body a natural extension of the beat. His smile was infectious. For a moment, Amara felt awkward, out of place. But then the rhythm took hold. She watched the women around her, their movements fluid and joyful, and she began to imitate them. A shoulder shrug here, a hip sway there. Soon, she was no longer thinking. She was just feeling. Dancing with Kofi, lost in the sea of joyful bodies, was the most liberating experience of her life. It was a final, definitive break from the rigid, performative world she had left behind. She laughed, a pure, uninhibited sound of pure happiness. Kofi laughed with her, and in that moment of shared, unrestrained joy, she knew she was completely and irrevocably in love with him. As they left the theater, walking hand in hand, high on the music and the magic of the evening, they passed a newsstand. On the cover of a glossy business magazine was a large photo of Zola and Richard. They were smiling their practiced, triumphant smiles, their arms linked. The headline read, "The new power couple, Ofori-Atta and Mensa dynasties unite." Amara stopped dead. A hot, clarifying anger surged through her. She saw their faces, so smug and self-satisfied, and felt a burning fury. They had taken her life, her name, her future, and they were flaunting it like a prize. But beneath the anger was a sharp, painful sting of loss. She saw the Ofori-Atta name in print and thought of her father. A wave of sadness washed over her. She missed him. She missed the man who had taught her to read blueprints, the man whose eyes would light up when she showed him her report cards. He had been weak, yes, allowing Vera to build a wall between them, but he was still her father. Was he happy now? Did he even miss her? She also thought of her friends, women she had grown up with, gone to university with. Had they believed the stories Vera had spun about her? Had they even tried to find her, or had they simply accepted her disappearance and moved on? The photo on the magazine represented not just a stolen future, but a stolen past, a whole life of connections wiped away. Kofi felt a sudden tension in her hand. He followed her gaze to the magazine. He saw the complex storm of emotions on her face, the flash of anger, the shadow of grief. He spoke, his voice low and steady. "So, that's them." Amara's jaw was tight. She nodded, her eyes still locked on the photo. "That's them," she confirmed, her voice like steel. She let go of Kofi's hand, walked directly to the vendor, and bought the magazine. She tucked it into her bag without another look. She was no longer hiding. She was gathering intelligence. As they continued their walk, a heavy silence fell between them. The easy intimacy of the evening was gone, replaced by the weight of the unspoken. As he walked her to the door of her small room, Kofi turned to her, his face serious under the dim streetlights. "Amara," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Whatever this is, you don't have to face it alone." She looked into his eyes, seeing the unwavering strength and support there. She knew he was right. But telling him the truth meant bringing him into her dangerous world. It meant risking the simple, beautiful life they had started to build. She gave him a small, sad smile. "Good night, Kofi," she said, before slipping inside, leaving him alone in the quiet darkness. The door closed, and for the first time, it felt like a barrier between them. In the months following Amara's disappearance, Vera orchestrated a masterful public relations campaign. The story, whispered at cocktail parties and hinted at in society columns, was that the heartbroken Amara had gone abroad to find herself, leaving her responsibilities behind. In the vacuum she left, Zola and Richard stepped into the spotlight. Their wedding was the social event of the year, a breathtaking spectacle that merged the Ofori-Atta's construction wealth with the Mensa family's deep political and financial connections. They were not co-owners of a single company, but the faces of a powerful new alliance. They became a brand unto themselves. Their bliss was on full display. They were photographed at the opening of a new art gallery, Richard's arm possessively around Zola's waist. They were interviewed for a feature on Accra's modern power couples, where they spoke of their shared vision for the future. Their first major joint project was a luxury waterfront development, a dazzling symbol of their combined influence. On the surface, they were the perfect picture of success, a glamorous and untouchable couple who had everything they ever wanted. Amara's father, however, was the one piece Vera couldn't control. His grief over Amara was a palpable force. He attended the wedding and smiled for the cameras, but his eyes were empty. He put a halt to any talk of a formal merger between the two family companies, stating that no major structural changes would happen until Amara returned. He continued to run his empire, but with a heavy heart, delegating more and more of the day-to-day operations to his trusted senior executives, pointedly not to Richard. Vera had her powerful son-in-law, but the ultimate prize, control of the Ofori-Atta board, remained tantalizingly out of reach as long as her husband was lost in his sorrow. The shine on the golden couple began to tarnish in private long before the public saw it. The first cracks appeared over money and power. One evening in their lavish new home, Zola confronted Richard. She held up a bank statement. "Richard, what is this? Another $500,000 into that emerging tech fund? The waterfront project is already over budget. My father is starting to ask questions about the Ofori-Atta contribution to the joint venture." Richard, pouring himself a glass of expensive whiskey, waved her concern away. "It's called leverage, darling. You have to spend money to make money. Your father is old school. He doesn't understand the speed of modern investment. Don't worry your pretty little head about it." The condescending remark stung. "My pretty little head is the reason you have access to my father's name at all," Zola shot back. "And he is not as oblivious as you think. He asked me why you insisted on using your own suppliers for the waterfront project instead of the Ofori-Atta network. He said their prices were 20% higher." Richard's eyes narrowed. "My suppliers are loyal to me. Loyalty is important. It's something your sister never understood." The mention of Amara was a low blow, and they both knew it. The argument ended there, but the resentment lingered. Zola began to suspect that Richard's investments were more about enriching himself and his own family than building their shared future. Another crack appeared at a family dinner. Mr. Ofori-Atta, in a rare moment of engagement, was discussing the upcoming bid for the National Hospital contract. "The key will be efficiency and integrity," he said, looking pointedly at his senior team. "We will win it by being the most trustworthy." Richard, trying to assert himself, chimed in. "Or we could win it by being the smartest. My uncle on the zoning commission owes me a favor. A little guidance could ensure the bid specifications are written in our favor." The table went silent. Mr. Ofori-Atta put down his fork and stared at Richard with a look of pure ice. "In this family," he said slowly, "we do not rely on favors. We rely on excellence. Do you understand me?" The public humiliation was immense. Zola felt a flush of shame for her husband. Later that night, she said, "You have to be more careful. You can't talk like that in front of him." Richard, his ego bruised, retorted, "Your father is a dinosaur. That's why he's losing. That's why his precious daughter ran away. He doesn't have the stomach for the real world." The words, meant to hurt, landed with brutal accuracy. The bliss was a performance. Their reality was a tense partnership built on shaky ground. Vera saw these cracks and knew her position was precarious. As long as Amara was a ghost, her father would never fully move on, and Zola and Richard's alliance would remain fragile. She needed to find Amara and force a legal conclusion. She summoned Mr. Mensah, the private investigator. "It has been months," Vera said, her voice sharp. "Have you found her?" Mr. Mensah slid a thin folder across the polished desk. "Finding a ghost is difficult. Your stepdaughter was very thorough. But ghosts leave whispers. I followed the whispers." He opened the folder. Inside was a grainy photograph of a woman haggling with a fabric vendor in a crowded market. The woman's posture, the way she held her head, it was unmistakably Amara. "Makola Market," Mensah said. Vera stared at the photo, a slow, cruel smile spreading across her face. "The market," she mused. "How fitting. My husband's precious, sophisticated daughter, living in the dirt. What are your instructions? Mensa asked. Watch her, Vera commanded. I want to know everything. Where she lives, who she talks to. I want to understand the pathetic little life she has built. When I have what I need, we will go there, and we will finish this. Even Vera's most masterful PR campaign could not completely silence the whispers of Accra's elite. The story of Amara's sudden trip abroad to heal her broken heart, followed so quickly by her fiancé Richard's marriage to her own stepsister Zola, was too juicy to ignore. At private clubs and exclusive dinner parties, the gossip was relentless. Heartbroken? Please, one society matron would whisper over a glass of champagne. Vera practically pushed Amara out the door to make way for her own daughter. A classic power move. And Richard, another would add, he has the loyalty of a stray dog. He follows whoever has the biggest piece of meat. Right now, that's Zola. But for how long? This gossip, while never printed, created an undercurrent of skepticism around Zola and Richard's perfect union. They were a power couple, yes, but everyone was watching and waiting for the first sign of a crack. They were admired for their success, but they were not well loved. This subtle but pervasive doubt was a weakness in their armor that they were keenly and uncomfortably aware of. Back in her small room above the tailor's shop, Amara read the glossy magazine article about Zola and Richard. She saw the carefully crafted smiles and read the glowing quotes. A year ago, this would have sent her into a spiral of grief. Now, it ignited something else, a cold, hard resolve. She looked around her room, at the sketches for her jewelry, at the small pile of books she used to teach the market children, at the single, beautiful wooden bird Kofi had carved for her, its broken wing now mended with a delicate silver wire. This was the life she had built from nothing. It was real, and it was hers. But it was also fragile. She knew she could not hide in the market forever. Sooner or later, her past would find her. The thought of Vera and Zola showing up at Makola, bringing their toxic drama and photographers to this place of peace, filled her with a protective fury. The thought of them discovering Kofi and using him as a weapon against her was unbearable. She realized she had been playing defense. She had been reacting, hiding, and surviving. But she was an Ofori-Atta. Her father had not raised a victim. He had raised an heir. He had taught her strategy, finance, and the art of the long game. It was time to stop playing their game and start playing her own. Her objective shifted. It was no longer about hiding. It was about preparing for the inevitable confrontation. She needed to understand the state of the family business. She needed to know what Richard and Vera were truly planning. And she needed to find a way to protect the life and the people she had come to love. Amara thought back to her old life, to the network of people she knew. Most were friends of the family, loyal to her father but now under Vera's watchful eye. But there was one person. Ngozi. Ngozi was the sharp, ambitious junior accountant her father had personally mentored. She was a year older than Amara, brilliant with numbers, and fiercely loyal to Mr. Ofori-Atta. But she was not from a powerful family, and Amara knew that Vera and Richard would likely overlook her, seeing her as an insignificant part of the corporate machinery. Ngozi was her hidden asset. Getting a message to her was a risk. Amara couldn't use a phone or email, she assumed everything was monitored. She needed an analog solution. She remembered that Ngozi's mother was a seamstress who had a stall in the smaller, less-known arts center market. The next day, Amara made the journey. She found the stall and spoke to the older woman, introducing herself as a jewelry designer. She commissioned a custom-made dress, paying in cash. Tucked into the folds of the deposit money was a small, tightly folded note. It was addressed to Ngozi and contained a single, untraceable email address, one Amara had created at an internet cafe, and a simple message: Ngozi, I need your help. I trust no one else. It was a long shot. She didn't know if Ngozi's mother would pass on the note, or if Ngozi herself would be too scared to respond. But it was the first move in a new game. That evening, she knew she had to do one more thing. She had to talk to Kofi. The secret of her identity was no longer just a personal burden, it was a strategic liability. She met him at his stall as he was packing up. "Kofi," she said, her voice steady. "Can we talk?" They walked to a quiet spot overlooking the city lights. Amara took a deep breath. "The people in that magazine," she began, "the woman is my stepsister. The man was my fiancé." Kofi listened, his face unreadable, as she told him a carefully edited version of the truth. She told him about the betrayal, about the suffocating pressure of her family, and about her decision to run away and build a life of her own. She told him her full name, Amara Ofori-Atta. She left out the details of her father's wealth and the true scale of his empire. She wanted him to know her, not her bank account. But she told him enough. When she finished, a heavy silence hung between them. Kofi stared out at the city, his expression thoughtful. Amara's heart pounded in her chest, bracing for his judgment, for his anger at her deception. Finally, he turned to her. He didn't look angry. He looked relieved. "So your family is complicated," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. "And you ran away to find yourself. It seems we have more in common than I thought." He reached out and took her hand. "Amara Ofori-Atta," he said, testing the name. "It doesn't change anything. I didn't fall in love with a name. I fell in love with the woman who teaches children how to read, who argues with suppliers about contract law, and who sees stories in broken pieces of wood." The relief that washed over Amara was so profound it almost brought her to her knees. He knew, and he didn't run. He knew, and he still loved her. "But," he added, his expression turning serious, "they are bidding against my father for the hospital contract. This is going to get very complicated, isn't it?" "Yes," Amara admitted. "It is." The barrier between them was gone, but in its place was a new, shared reality. They were no longer just two artisans in the market. They were on opposite sides of a corporate war, a war that was deeply, dangerously personal. A week passed after Amara's confession to Kofi. A week of nervous waiting. Every morning, she made the trek to the small internet cafe, her heart pounding as she logged into the anonymous email account. For 6 days, the inbox was empty. She began to lose hope, fearing her message had been lost or that Ngozi was too afraid to respond. But on the 7th day, there was a message. It was from an equally anonymous address, with no subject line. The body of the email contained a single line of text. "The old library. Wednesday. 10 a.m. There was no signature, but Amara knew. It was Ngozi. The library was their old haunt from university days, a place where they had spent countless hours studying for exams. It was a place full of memories, a place Vera or Richard would never think to look. The game was on. The George Padmore Research Library was a quiet, dusty sanctuary. Amara arrived early, her nerves on edge. She chose a secluded table in the African Studies section. At precisely 10 o'clock, Ngozi appeared. She saw Amara and stopped dead, her professional composure crumbling in an instant. Her eyes welled with tears. "Amara?" Ngozi whispered, her voice choked with emotion as she rushed to the table. "Oh my God, Amara, is it really you?" She pulled Amara into a fierce, desperate hug. "We thought, everyone said you were in Europe, then they said, we didn't know what to think. Are you okay? Where have you been?" The questions tumbled out, a mix of relief, fear, and a year's worth of worry. They were more than colleagues, they had been close friends since university, a bond forged over late-night study sessions and shared dreams. "I'm okay, Ngozi," Amara said, pulling back, her own eyes misty. "I'm safe. But I had to disappear." They sat down, their hands clasped across the table. "Why didn't you call?" Ngozi asked, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A new phone, a new number?" "I couldn't risk it," Amara explained. "I have to assume Vera is monitoring my father's accounts, maybe even tracking calls from new numbers to anyone connected to the family. I couldn't put you in danger." Ngozi nodded, her expression turning grim. "You were right to be cautious." They treat me like I'm part of the furniture, but even I can feel the chill. Things at the company, they're not right. Tell me everything, Amara urged. Your father is a ghost, Ngozi began. He's there, but he's not. And Vera, she's the one pulling the strings. I'm not in the high-level meetings, of course. They'd never let me in. But I see the aftermath. I see the paperwork. What have you seen? Vera is building an army of ants, Ngozi explained. Each one is small, but together they can carry away a whole house. A few months ago, she restructured the procurement department. Now, all the invoices for smaller operational contracts come through my desk for processing. Catering, office supplies, maintenance, they're all inflated. 10–15% extra on every single one. And they're all from companies I've never heard of before, companies that trace back to friends of hers or distant family. So she's skimming, Amara said. Constantly, Ngozi confirmed. Each transaction is too small to trigger an alarm. But I've been running the totals. Over the last 6 months, she's siphoned off a fortune. It's death by 1,000 cuts. And Richard? He's different. He's arrogant. I don't process the joint venture payments directly, but I see the capital transfer requests that go from Ofori-Atta to the project account. The project is burning through cash at an impossible rate. I got curious. The IT guys owe me a favor, so I got temporary remote access to the joint venture's payment server. Just for a few hours, late at night. Her eyes gleamed with a mix of fear and pride. Amara, it's a feast for vultures. He's not just skimming. He's paying his own family's companies for materials that are never delivered. I cross-referenced the payments with the warehouse delivery logs. There are millions of cedis worth of reinforced steel and high-grade cement that simply don't exist. Amara felt a cold dread. So the buildings aren't safe. How can they be? Ngozi whispered. He's building with ghosts. I need proof, Ngozi, Amara said, her voice firm. Ngozi smiled, a flash of the brave, brilliant woman Amara had always admired. You think I'd come here empty-handed? She opened her large, unassuming handbag. Every inflated invoice from Vera's network that has crossed my desk, I've scanned. Every fake payment record I could pull from the joint venture's server, I copied. It's all on this. She slid a small, encrypted USB drive across the table. It's not the whole picture, but it's a start. It's a pattern of behavior. The password is the name of the little chop bar we used to go to near the university library. Amara looked at her friend, her heart swelling with gratitude. Ngozi, you are taking an incredible risk. Ngozi's expression was fierce. Your father gave me a chance when no one else would. I processed the payroll, Amara. I see the names of the hundreds of workers who depend on that company. I'm not doing this just for your father. I'm doing it for them. I can't let those vultures run it into the ground. Amara left the library with the USB drive feeling like a weapon in her bag. She knew she couldn't analyze the data alone. She needed someone who understood the construction business from the inside. She needed Kofi. That evening, she brought him back to her small room. The air was thick with tension. She placed the USB drive on the table between them. This is everything, she said. Proof that my stepmother is bleeding the company and that Richard is committing massive fraud on their joint project. For the next several hours, they huddled over Kofi's laptop. Amara, with her innate understanding of finance, decrypted the files and navigated the complex spreadsheets. Kofi, with his engineer's mind, analyzed the project data. He pointed to a line item. Here, he said, his voice sharp with anger. This supplier. It's Richard's uncle's company. They've billed for 10 tons of reinforced steel that was never delivered. I can see it in the structural reports. They've used a cheaper, inferior grade to cover the shortfall. This building. Amara, if there's an earthquake, it won't be safe. They found more. Vera's network of overpriced catering and maintenance contracts. Richard's phantom consulting fees. Kickbacks disguised as commissions. It was a web of systematic corruption, from the petty to the potentially lethal. Kofi sat back, his face grim. He's going to do the same thing with the hospital, isn't he? If he wins. He'll try, Amara said, her voice cold. But he's not going to win. In that small, cramped room, a new alliance was forged. This was no longer just about Amara's inheritance or Kofi's rivalry with his father. It was about justice. Kofi looked at Amara, not as the girl from the market, but as the powerful, intelligent strategist she truly was. "What's our next move?" he asked. Amara looked at the data on the screen, a plan beginning to form in her brilliant mind. "We don't just prove the fraud," she said. "We build a better bid. We use their own corruption against them." "You have hit the absolute core of Mr. Ofori-Atta's character and the central family conflict. You are right. His reaction cannot just be pride and a sudden return to form. It must be layered with the immense weight of his own guilt and failure as a father. His inaction has been the root of the problem, and he has to confront that." The days following the meeting with Ngozi were a blur of intense, clandestine activity. Amara's small room, once a peaceful sanctuary, transformed into a secret war room. Every evening after the market closed, she and Kofi would huddle over his old laptop, the complex web of Vera and Richard's corruption spread across the screen. The data from Ngozi's USB drive was the key. It was a map of their greed. Amara, using the financial acumen she had absorbed from her father, traced the flow of money, connecting the dots between Vera's network of overpriced contracts and the slow bleeding of the Ofori-Atta company's operational budget. Kofi, meanwhile, applied his engineer's precision to Richard's fraud. He analyzed the phantom orders for steel and cement on the waterfront project, cross-referencing them with the building's architectural plans. He created a detailed report that showed not just the financial theft, but the terrifying structural risks it created. The buildings Richard was putting his name on were not just corrupt, they were dangerous. As they worked, their admiration for each other grew. Kofi was in awe of Amara's sharp, strategic mind. She could dissect a balance sheet with the skill of a seasoned CEO. Amara was captivated by Kofi's integrity and his brilliant, methodical approach. He saw not just numbers, but the real-world consequences of Richard's actions. One evening, Kofi looked up from the screen, his face grim. "They can't be allowed to build that hospital," he said, his voice low and firm. "It's not just about winning a contract. If Richard uses these same methods, he'll put sick children and their families at risk. We have to stop him." Amara met his gaze, her own expression hard as steel. "We will," she said. "But we can't just expose them. That would create a scandal that could destroy my father and damage the company for years. My stepmother would spin it, play the victim. We have to be smarter. We have to beat them at their own game." The official bid for the National Hospital contract was due in 1 month. The Ofori-Atta proposal, designed by Richard's team, was exactly what Amara expected, a flashy, expensive design that prioritized impressive aesthetics over patient care. It was a project designed to maximize profit. Kofi's father's company had a proposal that was solid but uninspired. Leaking the evidence of Richard's fraud now would be a mistake, Amara explained to Kofi one evening, gesturing to the data on the screen. It would start a public war. The media would tear both our families apart. The company's stock would plummet, and hundreds of innocent employees could lose their jobs. My father's legacy would be scandal, not success. Vera and Richard would paint themselves as victims of a corporate smear campaign. She looked at him, her eyes blazing with strategic fire. "We can't just burn their house down. We have to be smarter. We will hold on to this evidence as our trump card. First, we prove we are better. We create a third option, a proposal so superior it cannot be ignored." This was the birth of the Sankofa strategy. Their plan was audacious. They would secretly create their own, unofficial proposal for the hospital. Kofi took the lead on the design, pouring all of his passion into a revolutionary vision built on local materials and healing, open-air spaces. Amara worked on the financial and logistical side. Using the data from Ngozi, she built a budget that was brutally precise. She knew exactly where Richard was skimming, allowing her to create a bid that was significantly lower in cost but vastly higher in quality. She wrote a proposal that was not just a building plan, but a compelling vision for a healthier, more prosperous Ghana. They worked tirelessly, their shared purpose forging their bond into something unbreakable. They were a perfect team, his creative vision balanced by her strategic mind. With 2 weeks to go before the bid deadline, their proposal was nearly complete. It was a masterpiece, a testament to their shared values. But it was useless if they couldn't get it in front of the right people. The official bidding process was closed. The selection committee is chaired by the Minister of Health, Amara said, thinking aloud. He's an old friend of my father's. A good man. He's incorruptible, which is why Richard is trying to influence the junior members of the committee. How do we get it to him? Kofi asked. We can't just mail it, Amara said. It would be dismissed. We need a messenger. Someone he trusts completely. Her mind raced through the possibilities. And then it landed on one name. Her father. It was the biggest risk yet. She had to communicate with him directly, but she couldn't know if Vera was monitoring him. She devised a plan. She knew her father visited his wife's grave every Sunday morning, without fail. It was the one time he was always, truly alone. The following Sunday, Amara went to the cemetery. She didn't approach him. She stayed hidden, her heart aching as she watched her father, now looking so much older and sadder, place fresh flowers on the grave. After he left, she walked to the headstone. Tucked discreetly among the flowers was a small, waterproof envelope. Inside was another encrypted USB drive. There was no note. There was no explanation. There was only a single file on the drive, the complete, stunning proposal for the Sankofa Hospital. She had to trust that her father would recognize her touch, her mind, her values, in the work itself. She had to trust that the son he had raised was still there, beneath the grief. It was a message in a bottle, thrown into the most uncertain of seas. For Mr. Ofori-Atta, the months since Amara's disappearance had been a self-imposed prison of guilt. He wasn't just grieving a lost daughter, he was haunted by the knowledge of his own profound failure. He had seen the subtle cruelties Vera inflicted on Amara over the years, the dismissive comments, the casual undermining of her confidence. He had seen the jealousy festering in Zola. He had told himself they were small things, that Vera was just adjusting, that he needed to keep the peace in his new family. He had chosen peace over his own child's happiness, and the cost of that peace had been Amara herself. In the first weeks after she vanished, he had been frantic. He hired his own private investigators, separate from the police, to search for her, but they found nothing. He confronted Vera, who wept crocodile tears and blamed Amara's fragile emotional state and the pressure he put on her. He had no proof of foul play, only the sickening certainty in his gut that his own weakness had driven his daughter away. He had allowed a viper into his home, and it had poisoned everything. The grief that followed was not just sadness, it was a deep, paralytic shame that stole his will to fight, leaving him a ghost in his own life. His weekly visit to his first wife's grave was an act of penance. He would stand before the cool marble and silently apologize, both to his departed wife and to the daughter he had failed. On this particular Sunday, he arrived to find a fresh bouquet of lilies already resting against the headstone, his wife's favorite flower. Tucked among the stems was a small, waterproof envelope. His heart hammered against his ribs. He looked around the quiet cemetery, but saw no one. With trembling fingers, he retrieved the package. Back in his car, he opened it. Inside was a single, unmarked USB drive. He drove straight to his private study, a room Vera never entered, and locked the door. He plugged the drive into his personal laptop. There was only one file. What unfolded on the screen was a revelation. A complete, breathtakingly detailed proposal for the National Hospital. He read it, and the shame that had paralyzed him for a year began to burn away, replaced by a surge of awe and immense pride. This was her. The brilliant financial strategy, the deep commitment to integrity, the sheer intelligence of it, it was the daughter he had raised. She was alive. She was safe. And she had not contacted him directly because she did not know if she could trust him. The realization was a fresh stab of pain, but it was a clarifying one. She wasn't just hiding from Vera, she was hiding from his weakness. This proposal was not just a business plan. It was a test. It was a challenge. It was Amara reaching out, not asking for a rescue, but showing him how to fight. It was a blueprint for his own redemption. That is an excellent, crucial question that exposes a major plot hole. You are absolutely right. There is no way for him to know she is the Sunstone girl in Makola Market. My narrative jump was illogical. He knows the proposal is from Amara, but he has no idea where she is. His message cannot be delivered directly to her. He has to send a signal that only she would understand, a public move that she would see and recognize as his response. In that moment, Mr. Ofori-Atta made a choice. He would not confront Vera. Not yet. A public declaration of war would be loud and messy. He would not hide from Vera, but he would hide his intentions in plain sight. The king had returned, but he would pretend to be a pawn a little longer. He spent the rest of the day in his study, making phone calls. His strategy was twofold. First, he began to quietly reassert his authority. The following week, he attended every meeting, asking sharp, probing questions and rejecting several of Vera's overpriced procurement contracts, citing unfavorable terms. Vera was unnerved but misread his actions as a renewed interest in the hospital bid. Second, he had to send a signal to Amara. He had no idea where she was. The USB drive had been untraceable. He couldn't send her a message, so he had to make a public move that she, and only she, would understand the significance of. He thought about the proposal she had sent him. It was a masterpiece of strategy, but it was also filled with her values. One section in particular stood out to him, a detailed appendix on community engagement, which proposed a partnership with a small, struggling NGO dedicated to providing educational support for the children of market vendors. It was a cause his first wife, Amara's mother, had been passionate about. In the proposal, Amara had named the NGO the Sunstone Foundation, a detail that meant nothing to anyone else, but which he now understood was a clue. 2 weeks before the hospital bids were due, the Ofori-Atta Family Foundation made an unexpected announcement that sent a small ripple through the city's philanthropic circles. The foundation was making a significant, unsolicited donation to the Sunstone Foundation. The amount was large enough to be reported in the business sections of the national newspapers. To Vera and Zola, the move was baffling, a sentimental waste of money on one of David's pet projects inspired by his first wife. They dismissed it as an old man's folly. But in Makola Market, Amara saw the news on her phone during a break at the internet cafe. Her heart stopped. The Sunstone Foundation. It was the name she had invented for the community partnership in her secret proposal. It was a name no one else in the world knew. It was her father's answer. He had taken a piece of her plan, a piece named after her secret identity, and made it real. He was telling her, in a way only she could understand, that he had received her message, that he understood her values, and that he was now moving pieces on the board in response. Tears of relief and triumph streamed down Amara's face. Her father was not just a silent partner. He was an active player. The war for the soul of his company, and his family, had truly begun. Her father's signal galvanized Amara. The game had shifted from a defensive posture to a coordinated offensive. The final deadline for the national hospital bids was now just 1 week away. It was time to bring their secret proposal out of the shadows. He's created a legitimate channel for US, Amara explained to Kofi, her eyes bright with excitement. The Sunstone Foundation is now a real, recognized entity. It gives our proposal a name, a face. Their strategy was bold. They would submit their Sankofa proposal directly to the Minister of Health, bypassing the official bid process entirely. It was a massive breach of protocol, but it was a calculated risk. The minister, Dr. Adu, was a close friend of my parents, Amara told Kofi. He is a man of deep integrity. He will be disgusted by Richard's attempts to bribe his junior committee members. Our proposal will arrive on his desk as a wild card, a moral and financial argument so compelling that he cannot ignore it. She drafted a carefully worded cover letter to accompany the proposal, addressed to Minister Adu personally. Dear Dr. Adu, you knew my mother and father well. You know the values our family has always stood for. The enclosed proposal for the National Hospital is submitted in that spirit. It is not an official bid, but a private proposal from the Sunstone Foundation, representing a better, more honest way forward. We trust that a man of your character will give it the consideration it deserves. Sincerely, a daughter who remembers. She signed it simply. The words and the quality of the work itself would be her signature. Kofi had the proposal professionally printed and bound. Through Auntie Rose's network, they found a trusted courier to deliver the package directly to the minister's private office. The die was cast. While Amara and Kofi played their hidden hand, Vera and Richard were preparing for their public triumph. The day of the final bid presentation arrived. Richard was confident his back-channel dealings had secured him the victory. He presented his flashy proposal to Mr. Ofori-Atta and the board, who listened impassively. Mr. Ofori-Atta's calm, detached response unnerved Richard, who had been expecting either praise or a fight. Meanwhile, Mr. Mensa, the private investigator, was closing in. He had tracked Amara's routine for weeks, documenting her stall, her friendship with Auntie Rose, and her growing closeness with the woodcarver, Kofi Boahen. He recognized Kofi from his own files on the Boahen family, the Ofori-Atta's chief rival. This was an explosive development. He prepared his final report for Vera, confident he had given her the ultimate weapon to destroy her stepdaughter. You are absolutely right. My apologies. The dialogue I wrote for Richard was completely out of place. It was corporate jargon for a market audience. It makes no sense. The accusation needs to be simpler, more primal, and something that everyone in the market would immediately understand and react to. You're also right that Auntie Rose knew Amara was hiding something. Her shock shouldn't be about the secret itself, but about the viciousness of the public attack and the specific identity of Kofi. Let's fix this scene entirely, making Richard's attack visceral and instantly understandable to the market crowd. The day after the bids were presented, Vera decided it was time to act. She arrived at Makola Market in a gleaming black Mercedes, with Zola, Richard, and a society photographer in tow. They turned a corner and saw Amara at her stall, laughing with Auntie Rose. She looked healthy, vibrant, and happy. Amara? Zola called out, her voice dripping with fake shock. Amara looked up. Her laughter died. She saw them, Vera, Zola, and Richard, an unholy trinity of her past. Auntie Rose immediately stepped forward, placing herself protectively in front of Amara. Can we help you? She asked, her voice firm as steel. This is a family matter, Vera said, waving a dismissive hand. She turned her cold eyes on Amara. Amara, dear. This foolishness has gone on long enough. At that moment, Kofi returned from a supply run. He saw the commotion and rushed over. Amara, is everything all right? Richard's eyes lit up with malicious triumph. He stepped forward, his voice loud and booming, not for a boardroom, but for the crowd of vendors and customers that was now gathering. He pointed a dramatic finger at Amara. So this is where you have been hiding, he shouted. While your father grieves, you are here, living in the dirt. Then, he turned his attention to Kofi, his voice dripping with contempt. And who is this? Your new man? He looked Kofi up and down, taking in his simple work clothes. He then addressed the crowd directly. Do you know who this girl is? This is Amara Ofori-Atta. Her family can buy and sell this entire market 10 times over. She has been playing you all for fools. A gasp went through the crowd. The name Ofori-Atta was legendary in Accra. They looked at Amara, the quiet Sunstone girl, in a new, disbelieving light. Richard wasn't done. He delivered the killing blow, making it simple and brutal. He pointed from Amara to Kofi. And this man she is with? This is Kofi Boahen. His father is trying to ruin her family, trying to destroy our business. She has been sleeping with the enemy. That, everyone understood. Family feuds. Betrayal. A rich girl shaming her family with the son of their sworn enemy. It was a story as old as time. It was better than corporate espionage. It was a deep, personal scandal. The accusation, so poisonous and public, hung in the air. Auntie Rose stared at Kofi, then at Amara. She had known Amara was running from something, but to learn she had fallen in with the son of her family's enemy, that was a complication she had never imagined. The danger felt suddenly, terrifyingly real. Richard had twisted their love story into a public spectacle of shame. He had turned Amara from a respected member of the market community into a deceptive princess playing games with the common folk. He had branded Kofi as a snake. As the photographer's flash went off, capturing Amara's stunned face and Kofi's angry one, Richard smiled. He hadn't just found Amara. He had destroyed her sanctuary. He had turned her own people against her. He was convinced he had finally, completely, won. As quickly as they had arrived, Vera, Zola, and Richard departed, leaving a toxic silence in their wake. The black Mercedes sped away, but the damage was done. The photographer's flash seemed to hang in the air, an afterimage of the brutal exposure. Amara stood frozen, the world spinning around her. The curious, friendly faces of the market vendors had changed. They were now guarded, suspicious. Some looked at her with pity, others with a clear sense of betrayal. They were the people she had come to consider her community, her family. Now, they were strangers, separated from her by the vast, invisible wall of her father's wealth. Auntie Rose was the first to move. She didn't speak. She simply began to help Amara pack up her stall, her movements methodical and heavy. The usual cheerful chatter between them was gone, replaced by a thick, uncomfortable quiet. The silence was worse than any angry words could have been. It was the sound of a broken trust. Kofi stepped toward Amara, his face a mixture of anger and concern. "Amara," he began. "Not now, Kofi," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please. Not now." She couldn't look at him. She couldn't face the questions in his eyes, or the pity in Auntie Rose's. Humiliation washed over her, hot and suffocating. Richard had not just exposed her, he had made her feel like a fraud in the one place she had ever felt truly authentic. One by one, the other vendors packed up and left, avoiding her gaze. The vibrant, noisy market emptied out around her, leaving her in an island of profound isolation. She finished packing her beads and tools, her hands moving on autopilot. Without another word to Kofi or Rose, she turned and walked numbly towards her small room, the weight of 100 judging eyes on her back. Mr. Ofori-Atta was in a board meeting when his private phone, the one he kept for emergencies, buzzed with a text message. It was from Kwabena, the head of his security detail. The message was simple: incident at Makola Market. Photos will be on the blogs within the hour. A cold fury, clear and pure, seized Mr. Ofori-Atta. He stood up abruptly, interrupting a presentation from one of Vera's new procurement managers. "This meeting is over," he announced, his voice leaving no room for argument. "All of you, out. Now." The room cleared in stunned silence. He immediately called Kwabena. "Tell me." Kwabena recounted the entire scene: Vera, Zola, and Richard's arrival, the public accusations, the society photographer. He had it all on audio and video from his own discreet operative. As he listened, Mr. Ofori-Atta's last shred of doubt about his wife's character evaporated. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a calculated act of cruelty, designed to break his daughter. Vera had crossed a line from which there was no return. His strategic patience was at an end. The time for hiding his intentions was over. He made another call. "Minister Adu," he said, his voice grave. "It is David Ofori-Atta. I must see you immediately. It is a matter of urgent family and national importance." Richard and Zola were ecstatic as they drove away from the market. "Did you see her face?" Zola gloated, mimicking Amara's shocked expression. The little princess, covered in market dust. It was perfect. It was more than perfect, Richard said, feeling invincible. Branding her a spy who's sleeping with the enemy? She'll never recover. Her reputation is ruined. Your father will have no choice but to disown her completely now. Vera, however, was silent. She stared out the window, a thoughtful, calculating look on her face. Richard's performance had been effective, yes. But it had also been loud, crude, and public. It lacked the subtlety she preferred. And she had seen the look on Amara's face. It was shock, yes, but underneath it, she had seen a flicker of something else. A flicker of her father's steel. She felt a prickle of unease. Her phone rang. It was one of her contacts from the Ministry of Health, a junior committee member Richard had been bribing. Madame Ofori-Atta, the man's voice was panicked. There is a problem. A big problem. Minister Adu has just canceled the final award decision. He has called an emergency review of all bids. And he has summoned your husband to a private meeting. Vera's blood ran cold. What happened? A third proposal, the man stammered. It appeared out of nowhere. No one knows who submitted it, but the minister is taking it very seriously. They are calling it the Sunstone Proposal. Vera's hand tightened on her phone. Sunstone. The name of Amara's pathetic little market stall. She looked at Richard, who was still laughing with Zola, and a terrifying realization dawned on her. She had been playing checkers, thinking she was cornering a single, lost piece. But Amara had been playing chess, positioning her pieces for an attack Vera had never seen coming. Her pathetic, broken stepdaughter had just put the king in check. Minister Adu's private office was a quiet, wood-paneled room that felt insulated from the political storms of the city. When Mr. Ofori-Atta arrived, the minister greeted him not as a corporate titan, but as an old and worried friend. David, Dr. Adu said, his face grave. I am glad you came. I have a situation, and I believe you are at the center of it. On his desk were 3 bound proposals. 2 were thick, glossy documents from Ofori-Atta Construction and Boahin Construction. The third was slimmer, more elegant, with a simple Sunstone logo on the cover. 2 days ago, the minister began, this proposal was delivered to my office. It is not an official bid. It is anonymous. And yet, it is the most brilliant, comprehensive, and honest proposal for a public works project I have ever seen. He slid the Sunstone proposal across the desk. It details a plan for the hospital that is not only 20% cheaper than the official bids, but is also deeply rooted in our culture, supports local economies, and is built on a foundation of unimpeachable integrity. Then I read the cover letter. It spoke of values, of memory. It was signed, A Daughter Who Remembers. Dr. Adu paused, his eyes locking with Mr. Ofori-Atta's. David, this is Amara's work, isn't it? Mr. Ofori-Atta looked at his old friend, and for the first time in a year, he did not hide his pain. He simply nodded. Yes, Kofi. It is. I thought so, the minister said with a sad smile. He then pushed a tablet across the desk. It was open to a popular gossip blog. The headline was explosive, Ofori-Atta heiress in market shame. Caught in love nest with rival's son. Below it were the pictures Richard's photographer had taken, Amara's shocked face, Kofi's angry one, the crowd of onlookers. And then this arrived an hour ago, Dr. Adu said, his voice now hard with anger. A public spectacle designed to destroy her reputation. It seems your house is not in order, David. No, it is not, Mr. Ofori-Atta admitted, his voice low and full of shame. But I am here to fix it. He opened his own briefcase and took out a USB drive, the one containing all the evidence Ndozi had gathered. The official Ofori-Atta bid, the one submitted by my son-in-law, is a fraud. The man who did this to my daughter in public is a thief. And this, he said, placing the drive on the minister's desk, is the proof. Amara sat on the floor of her small room, the world silent around her. The market, which had been her sanctuary, now felt like a hostile territory. She had not heard from Kofi. She had not heard from Auntie Rose. The isolation was complete. She felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crumble, the old feelings of loneliness and despair creeping back in. There was a soft knock on her door. Her first instinct was fear. Had Vera sent someone? She remained silent, hoping they would go away. The knock came again, more persistent this time. Then, a familiar voice called through the door, low and gentle. "Amara? It's me. It's Kofi." She slowly got to her feet and opened the door. He stood there, his face etched with worry. He was holding a small, covered bowl. "Auntie Rose sent this," he said, stepping inside. "She was worried you hadn't eaten. She is angry. Not at you. At them. For bringing their ugliness into her market and hurting one of her own." He placed a bowl of steaming stew on her small table. "Amara," he said, turning to face her. "What Richard said, it doesn't matter. The lies, the accusations. None of it changes what we have. I told you that you are not alone in this, and I meant it." He looked around the small room, at the sketches pinned to her wall, at the half-finished necklaces on her workbench. "This is real," he said, his voice full of conviction. "What you have built here is real. Your friendships are real. Don't let them take that away from you." Tears streamed down Amara's face, not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming relief. He had come back. He had not abandoned her. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, holding on as if he were the only solid thing in a world that had turned to liquid. He held her tightly, and in his arms, the fear began to recede, replaced by a renewed sense of strength. The love they had built was stronger than the lies designed to break it. The news of the confrontation hit Accra like a shockwave, but not in the way Richard had intended. The gossip blogs and society pages exploded with the story, but the narrative quickly spun out of his control. Instead of a story about a treacherous corporate spy, it became a story of a great family drama. Amara, the lost heiress, was not seen as a villain, but as a tragic, romantic figure. She had given up her fortune for a simpler life, only to be publicly shamed by her cruel stepsister and opportunistic ex-fiancé. Kofi was not a handler, but a handsome, mysterious artisan, the rival's son she had fallen for. The public, tired of the polished perfection of Zola and Richard, had found a new, more compelling story to root for. The business community reacted differently. The accusation of corporate espionage between the two final bidders for the nation's most important contract raised serious red flags. Whispers about Richard's arrogance and risky dealings, once confined to back rooms, grew louder. The Boahen family, furious at the public slander of their son, began their own quiet investigation into Richard's business practices. Richard, who had expected to be celebrated as a hero who had exposed a traitor, found himself at the center of a storm of his own making. He had thrown a stone, expecting a small ripple, and had instead triggered a tsunami. The gilded world he and Zola had built was beginning to look very fragile indeed. The emergency board meeting of Ofori-Atta Construction was held the following morning. Vera, Zola, and Richard arrived expecting to finalize their victory. They believed Mr. Ofori-Atta, faced with the public scandal, would have no choice but to formally disinherit Amara and consolidate power under their control. They found a different man waiting for them. The grieving, passive David Ofori-Atta was gone. In his place sat the formidable patriarch who had built an empire, his eyes cold and clear. He was flanked by his personal lawyer and two grim-faced senior board members who had been loyal to him for decades. "Before we begin," Mr. Ofori-Atta said, his voice resonating with an authority no one had heard in a year, "I have an announcement. As of this morning, I have submitted a formal complaint to the National Financial Crimes Unit regarding extensive fraud within the Ofori-Atta/Mensa Waterfront joint venture." Richard went pale. Zola gasped. Vera stared at her husband, her mind racing. The complaint, Mr. Ofori-Atta continued, his gaze locking onto Richard, details a systematic pattern of overinvoicing, payment for non-delivered materials, and illegal kickbacks, all tracing back to you and your family's subsidiary companies. "This is absurd," Richard stammered, trying to bluff. "You have no proof." "On the contrary," Mr. Ofori-Atta said calmly. We have every invoice, every wire transfer, and a structural analysis report that shows the dangerous shortcuts you have taken. We have a complete confession from the junior executives you bribed." He then turned his icy gaze to his wife. "And Vera. We also have a detailed record of the restructuring of the procurement department, and a full accounting of the tens of thousands of cedis you have siphoned into the accounts of your friends and family through inflated operational contracts." Vera's mask of composure finally cracked. "David, you can't do this. The scandal will destroy the company." "No," he replied. "The scandal will be contained. The fraud was committed within the joint venture and through petty operational theft. The core of Ofori-Atta construction remains untouched. The only things being destroyed today are your careers and your place in this family." He slid a set of documents across the table. "These are our terms. You will both resign from all positions related to any Ofori-Atta project, effective immediately. Zola, you will relinquish your seat on the foundation's board. You will both sign non-disclosure agreements. In exchange, the Ofori-Atta company will not pursue private legal action, though I cannot speak for what the government or the Boahin family will do. Refuse, and this," he tapped a thick folder containing a summary of Ngozi's evidence, "goes to every newspaper in West Africa." It was not a negotiation. It was a surrender. Zola, seeing her entire world crumble, began to sob. Richard stared at his father-in-law, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. Vera, silent and defeated, knew she had been utterly and completely outplayed. At the same time, Minister Adu held a press conference at the Ministry of Health. The room was packed with reporters, all buzzing about the Ofori-Atta scandal. Dr. Adu stepped up to the podium, his expression somber. "I have called you here today to announce the decision on the National Hospital contract," he began. "As you know, there were 2 official bids under consideration. However, in recent days, new information has come to light regarding both bids." He held up a hand to quell the excited murmurs. "Firstly, the bid from Ofori-Atta Construction has been formally withdrawn by its chairman, Mr. David Ofori-Atta, pending an internal corporate investigation that he himself has initiated. We commend Mr. Ofori-Atta for his commitment to integrity." He then turned to the second bid. Furthermore, the Boahin construction bid has also been withdrawn. In an act of remarkable corporate citizenship, the Boahin family has chosen to step aside after their own review found their proposal, while adequate, was not the best possible option for the people of Ghana. The room was stunned into silence. Both bids were withdrawn? In light of these events, the minister continued, his voice ringing with conviction, "And in exercising my discretionary authority, my office has chosen to accept a third, unsolicited proposal. A proposal of extraordinary merit, vision, and efficiency. The National Hospital will be built based on the Sankofa design, submitted by the Sunstone Foundation." The reporters erupted in a frenzy of questions. Who was the Sunstone Foundation? Where did this proposal come from? Dr. Adu smiled. "The Sunstone Foundation is a new, community-focused design collective dedicated to honoring our past as we build our future. The government will be working in close partnership with them and with a consortium of trusted local builders, including elements from both the Ofori-Atta and Boahin companies, to bring this magnificent vision to life. It represents a new day for public projects in this country." The boardroom confrontation was only the beginning of the end for Vera, Zola, and Richard. Stripped of their positions and their power within the Ofori-Atta empire, their carefully constructed world fell apart with breathtaking speed. Richard faced the most immediate and severe consequences. The evidence Mr. Ofori-Atta had handed over to the ministry was passed to the National Financial Crimes Unit. The investigation was swift and brutal. The structural dangers discovered in the waterfront project became a public safety scandal. Facing overwhelming proof of fraud, embezzlement, and criminal negligence, Richard was arrested. His own family, seeing the depths of his corruption and the damage to their name, cut him off completely. He was left to face justice alone. Zola's fate was a death by 1,000 social cuts. Her loveless marriage to Richard dissolved into bitter, public accusations in the divorce filings. Without the Ofori-Atta name to prop her up, she was no longer their girl. She was the daughter of a disgraced mother and the wife of a convicted criminal. The society that had once celebrated her now shunned her. The invitations stopped coming. The friends disappeared. She was left with nothing but a tarnished name and the hollow echo of her ambition. Vera's punishment was quieter, but in many ways, more profound. Mr. Ofori-Atta did not divorce her. To do so would have created a messy, public spectacle he had no desire for. Instead, he enacted a colder, more personal justice. He cut her off from the family finances, providing her only with a modest living allowance, enough to live comfortably but not lavishly. She was removed from every board, every charity, every guest list that mattered. She was allowed to remain in the grand Ofori-Atta mansion, but as a ghost, a non-entity. She was surrounded by the wealth and power she had craved, but was forbidden to touch any of it. Her friends, who had only ever been drawn to her influence, abandoned her. She was left to wander the silent, opulent halls of the house, a prisoner in the gilded cage she had so desperately wanted to control. Her days were empty, her phone was silent, and her nights were filled with the bitter taste of her own failure. She had lost the one thing she truly valued, her status. And in the end, she became what she had always feared being, irrelevant. Months passed. The scent of market spices gave way to the smell of fresh earth and welding steel. The chaotic symphony of vendors was replaced by the rhythmic clang of hammers and the hum of machinery, the music of a future being built. On the sprawling construction site of the new National Hospital, Amara stood not as a lost heiress, but as a leader. A hard hat sat comfortably on her head as she unrolled a set of blueprints across a makeshift table, her focus intense. A short distance away, a sight that would have been impossible just a year ago, was now a daily reality. Two patriarchs, once great rivals, stood shoulder to shoulder. Her father, David Ofori-Atta, and Kofi's father, Mr. Boahen, were not arguing over contracts, but collaborating on a structural solution. The sadness that had haunted her father's eyes for so long was gone, replaced by the sharp, engaged light of a man who had found his purpose again. Every so often, he would glance over at his daughter, his expression softening with a look of pure, boundless pride. At the center of it all stood Amara and Kofi. He walked over to her, his own hard hat in hand, and placed his hand gently on her back. He was no longer the quiet woodcarver, and she was no longer the hidden shopgirl. They were partners, in work and in life, their strengths perfectly complementing each other. Their marriage, celebrated not with the opulent excess of their past, but with the heartfelt joy of their market family, had been the true merger. It was a union not of assets and power, but of vision and values. Amara looked up from the blueprints, her eyes meeting Kofi's. His smile was all the confirmation she ever needed. She looked out at the skeleton of the hospital rising against the bright Accra sky, seeing more than just steel and concrete. She saw the story of her own heart. She had fled a gilded cage and discovered her true self in the dust and chaos of the market. She had not simply taken back what was stolen. She had built something better. The simple sunstone necklace, the one piece of her past she had chosen to keep, rested against her skin. It felt warm, like a promise fulfilled. It was a constant, silent reminder of the truth she now lived every day, that a true legacy is not something you inherit. It is something you build, with integrity, with courage, and with the person you love. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a like, share it with those who appreciate tales of royalty and redemption, and subscribe to our channel for more enchanting African folk tales. Until next time, may your own path be guided by wisdom and compassion.